In this video, we're going to show you some of the key techniques that you'd use in Aspire to take an existing piece of clip art, like the one you can see at the top of the screen, and divide that up into smaller pieces that could then be used to create different layouts or designs for other applications, just like the set that you can see at the bottom of the screen. They're all been derived from that top model there. We won't be creating all these pieces in this, but we will show you all the most important techniques that you'd use to do that. So to begin, let's go ahead and start a new copy of Aspire. I'm going to set up a new file for this, and for this particular job we'll make the file 15 inches wide by 6 inches high, 3/4 of an inch deep. The date and position doesn't really matter for this, but the modelling resolution is quite important. Now you'll see by default that we've got 3 standard resolutions. Now in this case I want to really maintain a very high quality for my 3D model as I start to break it into separate pieces. So to do that, I'd actually like to access one of the resolutions that isn't shown here. To do that, I'll need to just cancel this process for the moment, and then when I click on create a new file, I'm going to hold down the Shift key. And now, if we use the drop down, you can see there's a couple of even larger resolutions available to me. So that's holding down the Shift key when we create a new file. So I'm going to choose the extremely high. As I say, we're going to make this 15 by 6. Everything else looks good there, and we can hit the OK button. So our first job is to bring in the piece of clip art that we're going to edit. So we'll come down to the clip art tab, and from the decorative folder, if we just give it a moment to load the images, I'm going to scroll down and look for a file called Flourish 118. Now there's a lot of flourishes there. I can see there's a couple here with 11. If I hover over, you can see the full name of the file there. When I've got the correct one, I can double click on that and that will load it into the center of my job. Now if I come down to the modeling tab, I'm just going to click on the icon to set the selected object size, and I'm going to make the width of this 10 inches, anchor in the center, link XY checked, hit apply and close. And then with that still selected in the component tree, I'm going to right mouse click, rename, and we'll call that original model, and just click in order to accept that. And that I'm going to keep now and not edit that particular version of it. That way I've always got a safe copy at this size. What I do want to do though is right mouse click, insert a new level, and I'm going to rename that level and we'll call it edits. And then I'm going to right mouse click on the model and ask the software to duplicate it, and then I'm just going to drag a copy up here. Then I'm going to add in one more level, so we'll insert another new level there and rename that level, and I'm going to call that level finished parts. Now what I'm going to do is take this model here, I'm going to make copies of it, we're going to start to chop parts of it off and make changes to it, and then as we complete each of our individual pieces, then we're going to move a copy of those onto the finished parts level, and we'll keep that level switched off so we won't actually see anything on there. It's just kind of a safe place for us to put them. So at this stage I'm going to select the edits level, I'm going to switch off level 1 as well, so our copy of the original model is now invisible. So the first thing I want to do is create a vector and just separate the flower from the rest of the leaves and stems that are in here. So I want to zoom right in on that area, so I'm going to use the zoom box, click and drag, so I'm very close into the flower there. We'll click back on the selection mode arrow. I'm going to come down to the drawing tab, and what I'm going to do is sketch my vector in there around the border of the flower at the points where I want to cut it. Now it's important that any vectors you draw are really high quality, because they're going to define the edge of your part. So it's worth taking that extra minute or so just to make sure they're nice and smooth and fit the exact edge you're looking for. So here I'm going to click on the icon to draw a polyline, and I'm going to start here, and then I'm basically just going to click points that are roughly on the edge of the flower there. Now as I come out into the open here, I don't need to worry about following that again. It's only on the points where there's actually something that's going to be cut. So I'm going to come down below the center there and then up here, and I don't need to worry about these being perfect at the moment because I'm going to come back in a moment and edit them, and then again we'll come out and leave that pointing upwards on the other side. Now if we just zoom in on the left here, I'm going to hit N on the keyboard to go into node editing mode, and we'll just grab these nodes here and hit S on the keyboard to smooth them. Now this is where it's important that I do a really good job of editing these, so you want to zoom right in and make sure you can see the edge of the grayscale of the part that you're looking to trim. If you want, if we hit the selection arrow, I can click the grayscale, I can right mouse click, change the object properties and increase the grayscale, or decrease rather, the fading of the grayscale, so it's easier to see that edge. Now I can come back into here and I can edit that more easily if I want, so I'm not sure. Depends on really on the design as to whether that's something you're going to need to do or not. So this is going to take me a couple of minutes here. As I say, it's really worth me taking the time to make sure that this vector follows the flow and the shape. Can hit F to fit that in and then zoom in on the next area. Here I'm going to hit S on the keyboard to smooth that, and then we'll just make that a bit of a sharper line. We'll smooth that one as well. Just drag this up. So I just want to get that flowing in there. In fact, we may even delete that. Okay, so that looks okay there. Let's hit F to fit again. Zoom in on the next area. S to smooth that. And then again, I might want to tighten up the radius in there. Make sure that this is flowing in at an appropriate angle. So that looks okay, and then we might just use the scroll bar and zoom in up the top here. Again, just select the nodes, still in node editing mode, S on the keyboard to smooth those. Then again we'll just continue to adjust these. And I say, even though this takes a bit of time, it's well worth doing because this will basically define the exact silhouette of my flower. So if these are nice clean quality vectors, then it means the edge of my flower is going to be nice and clean and have good quality too. So I'm going to insert an extra node there just to get that to bend around into there where I want that to be. So if we zoom out, now we can see where that line is. Maybe I want to right mouse click and just reduce the fade again, so that's a little bit more clear of where that's going to trim. I say I'm only worried about where it joins another part of the model. Now I can select that, shift and select the line. If we go to the modeling tab, I'm going to choose the option here to split the selected component using the vector. So component first, split line second, click on that icon, and now the software will just take a moment to do the calculation. So this may take a few more seconds than you used to, but there you can see it's done that. And now instead of that original model that I had there, I've got original model A, which is the flower, and original model B, which is the rest of the design. If we just come up and tile the windows, we can see that in the 2D and the 3D view there. Let's just maximize the 3D view for a moment and zoom in on the flower. Now when we have both parts switched on, we don't see any difference because we don't see the join mark there. But if we turn off original model B, so that's the stems and the leaves, we'll see, if we look very closely, that we've got a bit of a vertical edge now on this part where we've trimmed it. Now depending on your model, it may be beneficial to just tidy that up by very gently sculpting it. So if we want to do that to finish off the flower model, I can double click to select that in the 3D view, click on the icon for the sculpting, and then what we're going to do here is use the smooth option. We'll go with a fairly small diameter for the area that we're going to sculpt, and we'll keep the strength down there, preserve transparency on, and I'm just going to click and drag that over the edge of the part there, and what we can do is just tidy up that edge if we want to. So Really, in this case, it's not making too much of a difference, but it can be a good thing to do just around any of the areas where you've trimmed the part. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to see if we look down the z-axis there, so now I can just come up to the top and just smooth around here, and I know that that's going to just tidy up any of those vertical pixels that I may have had on those parts. I say this is going to become a new piece of clip art, so it's important to make it as nice as possible. When I like the look of that, I can hit keep and hit OK. So now we've created our first piece derived from the original model, which is a new piece of clip art in its own right. So we'll right mouse click on that, rename that and call it flower. And what we may want to do, if we just tile the windows again, is select that, click it again to go into transform mode, and just drag that over into the top corner. And if we switch back on original model B there, we'll continue to work with this. But this is one of the reasons why I like to set the extremely high resolution, and a part that's a little bit bigger is so I've got a place to kind of put the pieces that we edit and create around the side of the original model. Now that I'm done with at this stage, so I'm going to switch off the visibility for that, and I'm going to drag that component into the finished parts level so that just stays out the way, and now basically it's filed for use for us to take later and maybe start to export these parts out as 3D clip files if we want, or just to have them all within this file here as parts we can copy and paste into another session. So to keep things as tidy as possible, I'm just going to take this vector I've created here, I'm going to right mouse click and move that to a new layer, and we'll just call that layer old vectors, and we'll make that invisible and inactive so that that vector disappears. Let's just maximize the 2D view and hit F in order to fit. Now the next thing I want to do is crop out some other areas of our design here. So what I'm going to do is first of all get rid of one half of this. I only need to work on the left half. This is symmetrical, so I'm going to go to the drawing tab, I'm going to click and just drag a box here, just jog that over so it's completely containing the right hand side. We'll select the model, let's just tile the windows so we can see what happens, select the vector, and on the modeling tab I'm going to ask the software to clear the area of the component inside that selected vector. And again, I might just want to move that onto the old vectors layer there. So now if we maximize this again and hit F to fit, in fact we'll select the object there and zoom to fit the object to the screen, so that's zoom selected there, the icon. Now to isolate the leaf, the next thing I want to do is draw some more vectors around here. Now to save a bit of time, because you've seen the process that I'd use to do that, I've actually already created these vectors and I'm just going to import them. So I'll go up to File, Import, Import Vectors, and from the project folder there's an EPS file called Trim Vectors that I'm just going to open. Now if you haven't set up your part to be exactly the same size as mine, then you'll find at this stage these may not line up, in which case you would need to adjust the size or redraw them yourself. You can see, as we did before, we've basically created these vectors to be very clean and smooth on the areas that we're going to cut, and then outside of that just to go round to the next area that we want to trim off. And I've carefully gone through spaces like this to ensure that the vector doesn't overlap with the model. In fact there we've got a very slight overlap, so I might go into node editing and just tidy that up in order to make sure that it's going through the gap. So we'll hit F to fit again. We'll actually go back up and tile the windows once more. Let's just look down the z-axis and zoom in at the bottom here. We'll grab this set and zoom selected again there so we can see that a bit more clearly. And as I say, we can continue to work with this part of the model here because we've got the original that we can always copy back in afterwards as well. But in this case I might want to make a copy of this because we're going to trim out a couple of different areas. So I'm going to right mouse click, go to duplicate, and I'm just going to switch off that for a moment. So we'll come back to that in a second. Now I'm going to select this vector here, and I'm going to go over, click on the icon to split again, so we've got the inside and the outside. So now if we take a look at what we've created there, we've got the leaf and the stems. So I'm just going to right mouse click and rename so we can keep things in order. And I'm just going to switch off the stems for the moment and we'll take a look at what we've got here. Now if we zoom in to the 3D view, you can see we've got a harsh end there where we chop that off. Now typically as I start to assemble new bits of clip art together, it's good to have areas that extend out a bit that I'm going to be able to overlap and join with other shapes. So when you've got a hard edge like this, it's worth taking the time to just add an extra bit of shape into this to effectively finish it off. So let's just maximize the 2D view for a moment. We'll zoom in selected on these objects, and then I'm actually going to zoom in using the mouse wheel on the top part of the stem. I'm going to draw a vector. I'm just going to select the draw ellipse icon and just drag out a vector there and right mouse click to accept it, click on it again and just rotate that around a bit and essentially position that in such a way that it looks like an extension of the stem. So now I'm going to go into node editing. I'm going to drag this piece up here, and what I want to do is make sure that the vector's coming in there in the same place as where that shape ends and has a similar kind of continuation to the shape there. So again, we can spend as much or as little time as we want, but really I'm just looking to extend that shape out. Next I'm going to select that and we'll go back to tile the windows again, so we're nicely zoomed in on this area. I'm going to come to the modeling tab. And what I want to do is just create a round shape that's going to blend into here, and then we'll sculpt out any join. Now it'd be handy for me to know what the height of the model is here, and if we look at the very bottom of the screen at the moment towards the right, you can see it's displaying XYZ coordinates. Now this is the coordinates of the cursor in the 3D view, so it's showing me the XY position but also the Z depth of the model, and I can see there it's around 0.09 of an inch. So with that vector selected, so in the 2D view, I can just zoom in and see we've got that vector selected there. And now I'm going to go and click on Create Shape from Vectors. I'm going to set quite a high steep angle, so maybe 70, 80 degrees. Base height I'm going to set to 0. And then the scale height, and I can see I'm picking up some values from previously, are going to be around 0.09. That's the height we read off there. Now I can see as it overlaps at the moment it's being added to the shape of the leaf, so I'm going to set that to merge instead, and now we can see that blending in a little bit better. Now maybe I want to increase the angle there a little bit more, keep the scale height around the same, maybe we'll even put that up to 0.1, hit the space bar, and I'm really just looking to try and create a sort of an effective blend, or as close as I can get when I make that shape, and then we'll just call that end, apply and close. Now it doesn't matter if it's not perfect, because now what we're going to do, if we just maximize the screen, look down the Z-axis and zoom in on there, is just sculpt that in so it does actually blend together. So for this I'm going to select the leaf. We can double click in the 3D view, shift and double click the end here, click on the icon to go into the sculpting. It's going to tell me that I need to bake those components together, which is fine. I want them to be a single component. And now I'm going to uncheck show grayscale background there. We don't need that on. And I'm going to choose the smooth option first, and we'll set the strength of this a little higher than we had before, the diameter a little higher, and I'm just going to click on there and basically smooth out that blend. And you can just keep going back and forward over that as much as you want, just using a standard mouse for this, no stylus in this case. If I like the way that looks, we can hit keep, we can hit OK, and we can take a look to make sure that's given me a nice smooth shape. And so just to reiterate, the purpose of that is just to extend that leaf out, so as I start to put that together with other shapes, we can ensure that we've got something that overlaps and blends together. Now the other thing I want to do here is, as we did before, just smooth out some of the edges where we've cropped this. If we look around the side here, we can see we've got a harsh kind of vertical edge in here, and we've actually missed a little bit of material there, so I need to tidy that up. So let's zoom in down the z-axis, anywhere where I've got this extra material where I wasn't very careful with my vectors. If we double click this component now, come back into the sculpting, and what I want to choose is the undo brush and get quite a small diameter for this, and when I hold shift down on the keyboard, that acts as an erase tool, so it basically completely erases anything under the cursor. So as long as I'm careful, I can just come in there and delete any stray pixels of material that I've got. Next we'll come back to the smooth tool, relatively small diameter again, and just click over and just smooth off that edge where we crop the shape out. Then we may want to do the same in here as well. We can do that in any areas that we want. Also, we cropped out in this area too, so we might want to tidy that up as well. Again, personal preference, but spending these extra few minutes at this stage gives you a really nice, good quality bit of clip art that you can reuse without having to worry about tidying up these kind of extraneous areas. So I'm going to hit keep and hit OK. So now we've got a nice piece of leaf clip art. So we'll rename that and just call it leaf. And if we come back to the tiled view, again, if we want to maybe switch on the original model, the level for that, and see where it is, I can click on this and just drag it to a place in the part where it's not overlapping with that, just effectively to keep it out of the way. At this stage I'm going to right mouse click, and actually rather than right mouse click, I'm just going to uncheck the box for its visibility and drag that into the finished parts section. So I'll switch off the original model level again, and we'll come back to our edits level. Now we've got the stems model here, and we've got a copy of the model before we trimmed it as well. So for the stems, I'm going to come back to here, and in fact what I actually want in this case is a copy of this stems model. So I'm going to delete this. I made a copy of the wrong object there really, and I'm going to right mouse click and duplicate this one and just undraw that, and we'll come back to that again in a moment. Next, let's just maximize the 2D view, zoom by selecting the objects and zoom selected. So the next thing I want to focus on is this piece on the right here. So again, I'm going to trim out some of the other areas. So we'll just sketch a vector here, and then I'm going to sketch a curve. We'll just zoom in with the mouse wheel to this area here, and I'm just going to sketch this in to highlight that part. Just click on that to close. So just edit that if we need to. That looks okay. So now if we tile the windows again, just zoom in on the top, zoom in on the bottom. What I'm going to do is select the model. I'm going to shift and select those two vectors we just drew. I'm going to click on the icon to clear area of selected components again so that we can chop those out. Now at this stage, I think I want to zoom out here, and I'm going to select everything, deselect the model, and I'm just going to right mouse click and move those onto my old vectors layer so they disappear, and this becomes a little cleaner for us to work with. Now you'll notice where we've cropped this, if we zoom in to the 3D view, again we've got some of these kind of difficult edges. Quite often there's a little bit of extra material depending where our vectors were. So before we go ahead and finish off the end here and fill in the gap, let's double click this, come back into the sculpting tools and just tidy those up. So first thing I'm going to do is come down to the undo brush, and we'll just tidy up the edges here. A little bit bigger brush. I'm going to zoom in down the z-axis I want to work with there. Hold the shift key down while with the undo selected again, just so I can erase that edge there, so we get rid of some of those sticking up pixels, and we'll do the same here and also tidy up that edge. Around the end of this, I think I'm just going to cut this back, and then we'll add an extra bit in onto there with the same method that we used before. So I'm going to hit keep and hit OK. So again, just to reiterate that method, if we zoom in here, I can come to the drawing tab. Maybe we'll use the draw curve tool and we'll just sketch in a few points. Then we'll go into node editing, just tidy those up a bit. I'm going to delete that point and insert a new one. And I'll make sure this follows the same curvature as the outside edge here, so it really needs to continue that. And the less points, often the easier it is to control. So again, I might just delete that and just pull this, extend it down and adjust that shape there. Sometimes it can be beneficial just to zoom out and see if that is continuing there, so I think that needs a bit more of a bend to it, so we will add in a point again there. So you can see this can be quite a time consuming process, but again I just want to reiterate that idea that time spent at this stage will benefit you later on, and that I'm just not getting that smooth enough, that node, so we'll pull that out, and maybe what I want to do is adjust this one instead. Sometimes if what you're working on doesn't seem to be giving you the right solution, it's worth just playing around with an alternative. So we'll go ahead and just work with that as is. As we did before, we're going to go to the modeling tab. We're going to take a look and see how deep the part is there. It's just a little bit over 0.1, so we'll create shape from that vector. We'll use the same parameters we did before and just call that end, hit apply, and we've got that set to blend, so that looks okay. So we'll close that and we'll come back and sculpt that in a moment. Now for the other shape here, I think what I would like to do is try and continue this as a swept shape rather than using the create shape tool. Now it is a round shape, so we might get away with a create shape, but sometimes you might want to join a gap where you've got a more complicated cross section. So I'll show you the technique for doing that. If we come back to the 2D view and zoom in, what I'm going to do is create a curve. I'm going to click here, here and here, and again what I'm looking to do now is just adjust that so that it follows what I believe to be the sort of path, or what is an appropriate path for that shape. So that looks okay. Now I'm going to select that, I'm going to hold Control and I'm just going to scale that down, and then I'm going to move that into position here, go into node editing and just adjust that curvature to match the inner curve there. So I think that looks okay. Maybe you want to just back off the strength of the outside there a little. Again, trust your instincts, so when it looks right, it probably is. So now I want to know what the cross section of my model is at those 2 points. And the way that we can do that is use the measure tool and use this option at the bottom, model cross section. If I've got anything visible in my 3D view and I select that, then when I click between 2 points, what the software will do is generate a vector that represents the cross section of my design through those points. So if we click across there and hit close, I'm just going to click again and hold shift to drag that out, click this one twice, move that down to here, rotate that so it's roughly horizontal, doesn't need to be exact. Now for the first one I went from this vector to this vector, so that'll be my first rail, this will be my second rail. But then on the second one I went from this rail, which is the second rail, to this one. So I'm actually going to take that and I'm just going to hit H on the keyboard to mirror that horizontally. Now that almost makes no difference in this case, but it's just important to realise that I should have gone from the outside in if I wanted when I created that second one. Won't make much difference with the result we get here. Next, we can go to the modeling tab, and I'm going to tile the windows vertically in this case. We'll select this object and zoom in, and we'll just zoom in the 3D view so we can see what's happening there. Now I'm going to go into the 2-rail sweep. I'm going to select my outer rail, shift and select my inner rail, and click on Use Selection. Then I'm going to select my first cross section and click to add it, and click my second cross section and click to replace the second one here. I'm not going to scale the cross section with the width. We're just going to let the software pick up the sizes from those. We will set sweep between spans, although it won't matter because we have a different number of spans. Make sure scale to exact height is unchecked. Want to set merge, and we'll call this join and hit apply and see what we get. So when you create this, it may not be an absolutely perfect blend, but it will get you very, very close. Now what we can easily do is go in with the sculpting tools and just clean that up. And as I say, that would work with a much more complex shape blending from one section into another. Now we can maximize the 3D view and zoom in and tidy up those areas that we added. So I'm going to select these, holding the control key down, selecting multiple objects from the component tree, click on the icon to go into the sculpting. Tells me it needs to bake those objects together, which is fine. We'll come back to the smoothing first of all and just smooth the blend out. In this case, that should be absolutely fine for the piece we've used to connect these, because that's going to be a very, very close match. So that looks good. Can't see where the join was between those. However, here we've got a bit of a different shape going on, so it may benefit me to use the smudge tool instead. Now this is a situation where a stylus would really help, because you really need to be able to do long sweeping movements. So I'm going to set quite a big brush and quite a low strength, and I'm just going to click and drag this back and forward over this section to effectively create a cleaner blend between those shapes. By setting a big brush and a low strength, it gives me a better chance of controlling it with the mouse, although as I say, it would be much easier if I was using something like a Wacom tablet, a pen, a stylus, that kind of thing. So there, that looks okay. I'm going to hit keep and OK. Now I can see the curvature here, I haven't quite got this right. So what I'm going to do is come back to the 2D view, and I think I'm going to go in there and just create a new vector. So we'll go back to the draw curve option. I'm going to click up the top here, click in and around here, and in and around here, and just create a piece to cut out of there. So I don't think I've quite got that curve exactly right as I was aiming to do there. So we'll try a slightly different solution. Again, it's worth this extra effort, because if I get this right, then I know that this is a perfectly good reusable bit of clip art that I can get value from over and over again. So now if we select that and select that vector, come back to the modeling tab, I'm going to click clear area inside the vector. So getting an error message there, I need to make sure I've got my component selected. We may need to bake that first, and then we'll just select our vector and choose the option to clear area. So that's failed again there, so it's probably I've got an issue here with the vector. Let's just have a zoom in and take a look at this, and I can see when I was drawing this I've created a bit of an anomaly up the top here. So if we come in and just grab this, I can see, so I've got an open vector, I haven't closed this properly. Let's just delete that point there, hit escape, select that, and on the drawing tab let's just join that end there. And if we just go to edit, select all open vectors, that's good. It's not considering that to be an open vector anymore. So apologies for that. Good to maybe see why I was having a problem there though. So now if we select this, shift and select our vector, go to the modeling tab, we should be able to clear that area inside there. Now I can see straight away in the 2D view that's a much better flow to that curve. Now the only thing I would want to do is tidy up the vertical edge that I've created there that you can see. So again, if we double click that in the 3D view, go into the sculpting, select smooth, make sure the strength and diameter are not too large and too high, and just move the mouse back and forward in order to tidy that area up. We may want to look down the Z-axis. Again, just zoom in there, maybe a little bit bigger diameter just to blend and even up our shape. So I'm okay with that. That looks good. And at this stage I would like to create a safe copy of that. So we'll right mouse click and rename, and maybe we'll call that stem 1, something like that. You may want to give it a more descriptive name. Just click to undraw that, and again we'll just drag that into the finished parts there. Now I'm going to switch back on my stems here, and we'll show you one final technique that we can use here. So it may be, in this case, it would be useful for me to just get this end part of the design here. So if we go back into the 2D view, just hit F to fit. I'm just going to move these vectors onto the old vectors layer, and I'm actually just going to come and switch that on for a second, because I would like to take this component here, shift and select that vector that we imported earlier, go to the modeling tab and come back up to the split command again. Now what I've done in this case is basically extended the area through. So this is similar to the technique we've used where we've built additional areas afterwards, but here I've already got material there, so I've just extended the shape onwards when we do the split command. Now I'm going to select this object and delete it. I don't need that. And then we're going to go into the 3D view and take a look at what we've got. So we've split that out, but we've still got part of the original leaf. But now, by having that material there, we don't need to build a new piece on there. We should be able to just select that, go into the sculpting tool. To start with, again, we'll want to give that a good smooth to really even out the shape as much as we can, but that should still leave us with a bit of a lump on the end there. So we may once again go back to the smudge tool, quite large diameter, and just drag that out. And you just got to be patient with this, just keep dragging in order to create it, and sometimes you'll just rub back and forward over that, go into the smoothing tool, and then just tidy up that and hit keep and OK. And if we just rotate that around, we can see we've just cleaned that up and created a nice smooth finished blended shape again. So at this stage I might take that piece, let's just zoom to fit, click and drag that over into the corner. We'll switch off all our old vectors there, come back to the modeling tab, right mouse click, rename that, and we'll maybe call that stem 2. And if we just switch on our finished pieces at this point and each of the components in there, we can see the parts that we've started to make from this. But most importantly, you've seen all the typical techniques that I'd use to do this type of work. So you'd continue this process and continue to work with the original model, breaking it down into different pieces that you thought might be useful to you in creating your new layouts. And ideally you'd have some kind of a plan of what you wanted that to look like so that you could produce appropriate parts. Now we'll save this file in the project folder, so we'll just go ahead and say File, Save As, and I'll just call this Pieces Demo, and then I'll open where I actually got to with this particular flourish. So we'll go File, Open, and there's a in the file folder there you'll find a CRV3D file called Pieces Final. I'm going to hit the Open button, and there you can see all the different bits, and obviously the ones on the right here are all essentially derivatives of these two pieces where we've just joined them together perhaps to create this kind of S-curve or broken them down into their very most basic parts, and that's just going to give me the most flexibility. If we tile the windows, you can see the 3D versions of what you're looking at in the 2D. The one other interesting one that I did here was to kind of crop a bit of the flower out. I then rotated that around and sculpted it together, and then filled in the middle with some little circles that I used the Create Shape tool with. So if we zoom in on that in the 3D view, you can see I've basically taken the top half of this flower, I've rotated it around to make another half, I've cleaned up the join with the sculpting tools, and then built the shapes in the middle there to finish that off, to give me a different type of flower that I can use in laying out my other designs based on this original file. So that concludes this particular example. In here we've looked at some of the typical techniques that I would use when taking an existing piece of clip art and starting to chop it up into smaller pieces that I can use to create different layouts based on that same look and feel. We looked at how important the vectors were in drawing nice accurate vectors. We looked at the trimming, cropping and splitting commands that we can use to isolate different areas of the model, and then how we might use the sculpting tools in order to tidy up any hard vertical edges we create, how we might create additional pieces or additional shapes using the Create Shape or the 2-rail sweep tool in order to join or finish off the ends or edges of my parts as well. Now I've got a whole kind of palette of pieces that I can use in order to create variations on this theme, and you will see me do that with some of these exact pieces that I've created here in a companion video within this section of the tutorials. Thanks for watching the video.